What if I told you that the locations you see in Disney's Encanto aren't actually works of fiction? Hi all, I'm Isrado and you're watching my travel channel where I talk all things Colombia. So last year I did a roughly 40-minute video analysing almost every single cultural detail of Disney's Encanto, from clothing, plants and foods, and music, character mannerisms and historical references. I tried to unpack and explain every reference to Colombia I could find. Just one of the many details I discussed was the film's inspiration for its locations. If you're watching this video, I assume you're interested in hearing about this, but I realize not everyone wants to strap in for a 40-minute video, so I thought it might be a good idea to do a short version where I focus exclusively on the locations and nothing else. Still, if you are keen on learning about all of the other cultural references, you can check out that long video here or via the link in the description. With that preamble out of the way though, let's get into it. So despite predominantly being located in what seems to be a radius of only a few square kilometers, Disney managed to reference a lot of regions from throughout the country in the movie. And I'm not even talking about the regional references in the clothing and the music and all those other cultural details. I mean that the actual physical setting of the film is directly based on a bunch of real-life locations. To give some chronology to this, I'll start from the beginning of the film and work my way through to the end, so needless to say, this will contain spoilers. For our first location, right at the start of the movie, the first exterior shown is this colourful river that has a strange pink colour to it. We get a better look at it later on in the film during the daytime, and yeah, it's pretty unusual. Believe it or not though, this isn't just some artistic license, as this river does indeed exist in real life in the Colombian department of Meta, southeast of Bogotá's department of Cundinamarca. It can be found in a mountain range not far from the Andes and makes up a tiny part of the Orinoco Basin, one of the largest rivers in all of South America. This colourful part of the basin is known as Caño Cristales, which translates to Crystal Channel in English, and was actually only discovered in the late 60s. In terms of the bright colours, these are predominantly caused by the plants on the riverbed, which eventually turn pink and red once fully grown. In different stages of their growth cycle, they can also be green and yellow, meaning that the colours of the river overall can change throughout the year. So as I said, this river is located in the department of Meta in the real world, but the next reference location is one that's actually quite a distance from here in real life. You see this scene here where the mountains with the tall palm trees suddenly grow out of the ground due to the miracle, creating an entirely new setting surrounding the river? Yeah, well, this setting was inspired by Valle de Cocora, or the Cocora Valley in English. As it happens though, the Cocora Valley is in an entirely different region to Caño Cristales in the real world. To give you an idea, here's where the river is on a country map, and here's where the valley is, roughly 300 kilometers away in Quindío, an entirely different department. So yeah, clearly there was some creative liberties taken in mixing these two locations into one, but putting that aside, let's talk a bit more about the valley for a bit. As said, the Cocora Valley is located in Quindío, one of the 4 departments that make up the coffee axis. As the name would imply, this is the most popular region of the country for growing coffee, due to the prime conditions of its Andean rainforests. Beyond producing coffee, this region is also moderately popular for tourism, with the Cocora Valley being its most famous attraction. The valley is most known for its tall palm trees known as the Quindío wax palm. In fact, these are actually the tallest palm trees in the entire world, and when you see them scattered across the cloud forests of the valley, it honestly looks like the setting of a Dr. Seuss book, as many have pointed out. The entire site is protected World Heritage and, as you'd expect, is very popular for hiking as well as camping. I can say from my experiences visiting here that it's well worth checking out. The views are majestic, and despite being a famous site, it's often fairly quiet if you go on a weekday during a down season. If you'd like to go, I actually did a whole video on how to get there, which I'll put a link to down in the description below. But yeah, as for Encanto, the creators have spoken openly about the inspiration they got from their own visit here, and you can clearly see it with all the giant palms and mountains in the background, both in this scene and throughout a lot of the movie. Just bear in mind that unlike the movie, there is no village in the real-life valley. The village in Encanto is actually a reference to some other places, which I'll get to later. Anyway, as you can tell, they're mixing a lot of locations into the one area for the movie. In fact, even in this scene alone, we get another reference just seconds later. I'm talking about the Casita itself, the Madrigal household. Now, I realize this is a video about specific real-life counterpart locations, and I mean, this is just some house, right? Sort of. Like, yeah, there's probably some inspiration from Colombian architecture, but not from any one specific house in particular, right? Well, that's debatable, but while we're on the topic of the house, I figured why not talk a bit about some of those general Colombian architectural inspirations. First of all, the ceramic tiles that make up the roof here are known in Spanish as tejas and are very popular on houses throughout the country, particularly the more expensive homes, along with colonial buildings. Speaking of colonial buildings, the colourful walls, Venetian windows, and the ornate balconies remind me a lot of the old buildings you see on the Caribbean coast of Colombia, as do the pot plants hanging from the ceiling on the inside, which look like something straight out of Cartagena. You can tell from the foundation of the house that it appears to be constructed using piedra y tierra, or stone and earth, which were also some of the predominant building materials in colonial times. Last architectural thing I'll point out is that the square-shaped indoor courtyard with rooms surrounding it on the second floor is of a very traditional, grandiose Colombian style, which brings me to the real-life comparison I wanted to make here, the Hacienda Bambusa. This is a premium Colombian hotel that has a very similar style of indoor courtyard with several rooms surrounding it. It's also got the same terracotta roof and ornate balconies, and although this kind of mansion is by no means a one of its kind in Colombia, I do have reason to believe that this hotel in particular served as inspiration for the Casita. I can't prove this was the case, but what really makes me believe it is not only the design of the house, but also its location. See, this hotel is actually in the department of Quindío, which, if you remember from before, is also the department where the Cocora Valley is, the film's primary inspiration for its setting. It would make sense, therefore, if the filmmakers decided to look for a house in the area to fit with this setting, even if they are taking some creative liberties in mixing other locations together. Anyway, I'll talk about the rooms of the Casita in a bit, but first, let's talk a bit about the village the people of Encanto live in. Like I said before, this isn't actually based on a real-life Cocora Valley village, because, well, the real-life Cocora Valley doesn't have a village. Instead, the Encanto village is primarily based on a few other rural Colombian towns. The first of these towns, Salento, is admittedly pretty close to the valley. In fact, most people will stop in Salento before visiting the valley, as the only transport that will take you to the valley are the jeeps that routinely leave from here. Being just a 20-minute drive away, it mightn't technically be in the valley, but it's the next best thing, so it's clear why the filmmakers decided to use the town as a reference. I wouldn't say there's any particular attributes that are unique to Salento on display. I mean, yeah, there are some general things like the fact that it's colourful and that there's a traditional town square, but besides all the plants you see that are largely from Quindío, everything here can be found in many other traditional Colombian towns across the country as well. The only reason I'm even singling out Salento to begin with is because the filmmakers did confirm that they visited here and used it for inspiration. If you want to see some clearer inspiration though, then look no further than the second reference, the town of Barichara. This one, on the other hand, is nowhere near the valley, and in fact it's not even in the same region, but rather in the department of Santander, roughly 200 kilometers away. Despite this, the resemblance between this town and the one in the movie is a lot more striking. The things that stand out to me here personally are the colonial architecture along with the hilly cobblestone streets. Regarding the architecture, they seem to have preserved more of its original colonial design than Salento, like the visible stonework on the houses for instance, or the unpainted wooden banisters and window frames. It's hard to put my finger on exactly what it is, but for whatever reason, this just feels less modern and more like a village lost in time compared to Salento. And I say that as someone who's visited both towns myself. Perhaps for this reason, there seems to be more inspiration taken from it for the movie, and you can easily see the similarities if you put them side by side. You'll notice the Barichara inspiration even more though in the village from Abuela's flashback later in the film, what with the whitewashed buildings and all. Once again, a lot of these similarities are things you'll also find in other Colombian towns, particularly the ones nearby, but Barichara was also confirmed to be a town that the filmmakers visited and used as a guideline. Now there was also a third confirmed location that inspired the village of Encanto, and that is the town of San Basilio de Palenque in the department of Bolivar in the Caribbean region. This whole region is one of the most popular areas of the country for Afro-Colombian people, and this town in particular was actually founded by African slaves who'd escaped from their captors during the period of Spanish colonization in the 1600s. In terms of inspiration, admittedly I can't really tell what the filmmakers have taken from this town for the village of Encanto, outside of maybe the main town plaza if anything. Once again, this was confirmed as inspiration, but I'd hazard a guess that there was probably more influence taken from other cultural aspects of the area, like the music and fashion, as I'm having a hard time finding much resemblance with the town itself. Whatever the case, I'll move on to the next location of the movie now, and for this I wanted to come back to the house to look at a few things, as there's actually some more to discuss here. If you've seen the movie, you'll know that several of the Casita's rooms seem to contain their own unique biomes. It isn't entirely clear whether these rooms are actually in the house or if the doors to these rooms are more like portals to some other places, but whatever the case, one thing that's clear is the inspiration from real-life regions of Colombia. Starting with Antonio's room, this was inspired by the department of Choco. This is an area of the Pacific region known for its extensive rainforest, which you can clearly see in the movie. Now you might think this biome was chosen for Antonio because, I don't know, there's a bunch of animals and he seems to like animals. And yeah, there are. But another reason it goes with his character is that Choco happens to have the largest Afro-Colombian population of the entire country. This ethnicity was the core inspiration for Antonio's character design, and so it feels apt that his room would be styled after the region most popular among this ethnic group. Regarding the details of the room itself, it's worth pointing out that jaguars, like the one you see in the film, are native to the Choco region, as are snakes along with toucans. In fact, this toucan you see here with the black and yellow beak is a type that's exclusively found in Choco, aptly named the Choco toucan. Besides the animals, I've no doubt that a lot of the flora here is also native to the region, but I'm no Colombian horticulturalist, so I couldn't name many of them. Now, I'll get onto the final location for this video in a sec, but first there are a couple of quick moments in Luisa's song that shows a high altitude setting that's very clearly meant to be part of the Andes mountain range. I'm not sure if there are any high altitude areas with geysers like this, but you will find volcanoes in Colombia, so it's entirely possible. The real giveaway that this is high up somewhere are these plants known as frailejones, which are only native to high altitude areas. Then the next scene of Luisa and Mirabel hanging from a mountain definitely seems to suggest the Andes, especially given the surrounding cloud forests, which are typical in the Andean parts of the coffee axis. Anyway, with that little detour out of the way, let's move on to the final location, and for that we're going to go back to the Casita once again, only this time we're looking at Bruno's room. This room seems to be primarily inspired by Los Estoraques, which is a famous nature reserve containing columns of brownstone that have naturally formed over thousands of years. I also want to make a correction here, as in my Encanto analysis video, I said that these columns were in the department of Santander, but actually they're in a department to the north, aptly known as Norte de Santander. One thing that strikes me as different here compared to the real Estoraques though, is the sand. The real-life wonder isn't part of a desert or anything, as the region's ecosystem is generally considered humid Andean forest. So this makes me wonder whether this is another mishmash of several regions into one. In terms of sand, the part of the country that would be most known for this would be La Guajira, which is predominantly a coastal desert and dry shrubland. Of course, it is possible that they just put sand in Bruno's room purely as a symbol of time, because, you know, the hourglass and all. Outside of the sand, I do wonder whether the endless steps leading to the top of his room are in reference to the long flight up the stairs of El Peñol in Guatapé. That might be a stretch, but it is one of the iconic things people talk about regarding this wonder, so it's quite possible that it serves as inspiration. What I do know for a fact though is that the inner vault of Bruno's room was at least in part inspired by the Salt Cathedral in Zipaquira, as confirmed by director and writer Jared Bush. This Salt Cathedral, or Catedral de Sal, is basically a salt mine that's been transformed into a cathedral. It doesn't technically have any official status as a cathedral since there isn't any bishop, but they do still hold services on Sundays. You can also visit throughout the week as a tourist, as it's set up as a sort of walkthrough experience with various altars and chapels, part of which represents the 4 stations of the cross. To be honest, I don't think there's any overt inspiration taken from this cathedral for Bruno's room. It seems to be more just the broader aesthetic, you know, a dark space with glowing colours. Whatever the case, those were all of the inspirations for this room, and in fact, that's pretty much it for the entire movie too. I know this is only halfway through the movie, but I've actually already listed every location that appears in the film from here on out. It's pretty much just a bit more of the village, some more of the house including Antonio's room again, then they go back to the river inspired by Caño Cristales, then Abuela's flashback is inspired by Barrichara, as I already mentioned, and that's pretty much it. Obviously, there are many more references to regions of the country and other details like clothing and food, as I alluded to earlier, and if you want to hear more about that, then you can check out that other Encanto analysis video I did where I dissect all of that. Again, link in the description for that. For now though, those were all the actual settings of the film and the real life locations that inspired them. As always, thanks for watching all this way, and I hope you learned something. If you enjoyed this, feel free to like, subscribe, bell, as I usually upload every week. And if you have any video suggestions or questions, you can leave those in the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer them. Until next time though, I'll see you around. Ciao!